My name is Dr. Rashmi Halker Singh, and I'm the Deputy Editor of the Headache Journal. I am joined today by Dr. Rebecca Wells, Dr. Estave, and three students, Reed Anderson, Anissa Berger, and Caitlin Margol, who were the authors of this year's Headache Journal Early Career Award, the paper Learning the Full Impact of Migraine Through Patient Voices, a qualitative study. Before we begin, congratulations from the entire editorial board at Headache for this award. This is tremendous work that helps to add insights to the patient perspective on migraine, which is so important as we try to maintain a patient's perspective on what we do, from research to clinical care. And we are so honored that you chose to publish your piece with us and we were able to highlight your work. So can we begin by just allowing you to share what you did? Just walk us through your paper a little bit. Tell us about your objectives and how you sought to achieve that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And this is such a huge honor for me personally, for our entire research team, and for the field of headache medicine to acknowledge the patient perspective. And so I'm just really, really appreciative of this award, and it's so very meaningful. So this research is really important because migraine is the second leading cause of disability in the world. And so we really wanted to further understand migraine burden and impact on patients' lives. And so we analyzed interviews with patients that were conducted as part of two separate clinical trials. And both of the trials were conducted evaluating mindfulness in migraine. And the findings from this large qualitative study, which involved 81 participants who provided nearly 3,300 minutes of recorded interviews, is really what gave us the research that we're discussing today. And this research highlights how people with migraine experience the disease as a major burden despite widespread treatment availability. So the original goal of these interviews was to better understand participants' experiences within the context of our clinical trials. So we really wanted to know how the interventions impacted patients' lives. And we began the interviews by asking patients, so how does migraine impact your life? And we were blown away by the depth of responses to this seemingly simple yet profoundly important question. So we began analyzing the interviews using inductive reasoning, which really involves immersing ourselves in the data and reading and digesting it so that we could make sense of what the participants were saying to understand what they felt and what they experienced. And we worked as a team. As you can see, many of our team members are here today to discuss emerging patterns and categories and themes. The impact of headache on patients' lives immediately became a prominent pattern as participants richly illuminated the patient perspective of the tremendous burden of this common neurological disease. So it was as if the patients were directly speaking to us, wanting their voices heard and relayed to the world of how migraine impacts their lives.
That's so amazing. We talk so much about migraine all the time. It's as you mentioned, it's a prevalent disease. It impacts over 1 billion people in the world. It's the second leading cause of years lived with disability worldwide. But it's something else to talk about what happens to the individual person. And, it really struck me reading through your paper and hearing about the individual statements from different people and how much of an impact this one disease can have and how it impacts people so differently. Were you surprised by any of these findings at all? I mean, what were some of the things that really struck you?
Yeah, so there were really three main things that stood out, which really in a lot of ways, all of the findings are surprising. And I think the first thing that was so surprising to me was the magnitude and pervasiveness of the findings, which really demonstrate the enormity of the impact. So specifically, despite most patients in our study being on acute or prophylactic medications, 90% reported that migraine had a negative impact on their life. Even though we didn't ask about specific domains of life, I mentioned, we just said, how does migraine impact your life? 68% endorsed specific domains of life impacted, and 52% described impact on emotional health. So that was one of the big things that we just did not expect. It was the enormity of and pervasiveness of the impact. The second thing that was really fascinating that we discovered was how migraine impacts patient lives in ways that we often don't ask about, and ways that we don't measure or target specifically in clinical practice or research. So specifically, like migraine affects patients' ability to function, but it also affects relationships with colleagues at work, with family and friends. We found that migraine contributes specifically to isolation, frustration, guilt, fear, avoidance behavior, and stigma. So I'll give you an example of this. A patient says, I have a migraine. A family member says, well, what did you do to cause it? And this simple interaction demonstrates the layers of impact that we saw in our study. That migraine can create feelings of guilt, like it's the patient's fault. Like, what did you do to cause this headache? Which then contributes to stigma, as if it's the patient that's causing migraine attacks to occur. And then this can set off a period and a pattern of avoidance behavior where individuals are creating their lives to try to avoid everything possible to make sure that they do not have attacks. And the third thing that we really found that was really impressive was how important the patient voice is in moving forward with clinical care and research in the field of headache medicine. And on a personal note, one morning I was up super early and I read through all of the quotations that we have of headache impact. And I was editing them and working on it. And then I went to clinic and was caring for patients all day. And it was like I had like new ears for listening. It was like all of a sudden, all these little things that I've been hearing for years about how migraine impacts their lives, it put it into perspective. And now when I hear patients in clinic, I just have this new insight. And when they tell me things about the dramatic impact that it has.
Wow, that's incredible. So as you know, I'm a clinician who takes care of adult patients who have migraine. I'm also a friend and colleague to many people who have migraine. And I'm also a mother to an adolescent who has migraine. So out of everything you learned, do you have any advice for me for things that, something that your patients might have told you that maybe I could take to maybe do better by all these
Yeah.
people in my life who've been impacted by this very pervasive disease?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I think a couple of thoughts that I have. I think the most powerful thing that I got from the data that sort of emerged naturally that we were not expecting is the guilt that patients experience when they are not able to function at their full capacity and other people have to take over. So like colleagues at work, people describe the burden that they placed on them. People describe the burden that they placed on family members or on friends, and how the unpredictability really impacted their lives. So I feel like in a lot of ways, anything that we can do to colleagues, friends, and family to offset that burden, which includes awareness that migraine is a disease. And although there are lifestyle factors that can influence whether or not individual attacks can happen or not, and that's what we teach our patients, that, hey, you can have some control over this. When individual attacks happen, they just sometimes just happen. And so taking away that guilt that like, this is your fault, like you did something wrong to make this happen, I think is something that we all can do better in our lives, because that's part of the stigma. And so I think just being compassionate in our ability to relate and understand that, this is a disease. And when people have asthma attacks, we don't look at them like, oh, this is your fault, and so thinking about migraine attacks similarly, that migraine is a disease, I think is really important. So that's a great question.
Yeah, that's actually really great advice. We might not be able to cure every person we take care of in our clinic, but we can absolutely show compassion and understanding and empathy and validate what they're experiencing. I think that's really, really some profound truths that you just shared.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why, I think you explained to me why these findings are important. What do you see as the next steps? What do we do with all of this information? I mean, there's so much here. What are you going to do with all of this data?
Yes. Well, I'm excited. I want to tell you about next steps, but Dr. Estave also wants to highlight a couple of the key points that we had from our data. Some of the things that we found that were specifically interesting that we wanted to highlight as well.
Oh,
Dr.
yes,
Estave?
please do.
Awesome, thanks. So we definitely just want to mention that, the results from this study that we did really demonstrates the tremendous and complex burden that migraine can have on people's lives. And it highlights a lot of the areas of future research that we'll get into in just a little bit. And, though a lot of these research participants didn't have a formal diagnosis of a mood disorder, more than half of the participants reported the negative impact on their emotional health that went beyond depression and anxiety. So one example is that participants often described feeling guilty for missing work, missing events with family, social activities, and that often led to them feeling frustrated and feeling isolated from others. Another thing is that our studies showed that factors outside of the migraine attacks themselves, such as anticipatory anxiety, fear of the next attack, and avoidance behaviors that often lead it to a lot of life restrictions, were major contributors of poor quality of life overall. And just some other themes that are mentioned were internalized and externalized stigma. And it really underscores this need for societal change and awareness that migraine is a neurological disease that can, and this hopefully our paper can sort of start changing the perceptions people have on migraine. And lastly, the ictal effects on cognition and mood reveal the need for future research to better understand if these factors are mediated through pain, or are they more direct expression of neural dysfunction and dysregulation.
And Dr. Estave just brought up about cognition, and I'm really excited about the American Headache Society meeting tomorrow morning on cognition and its impact on migraine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think those are really important findings, and your research has really shed a lot of light on so much from this patient perspective of migraine, and it's incredible. Just that simple question has led to so much depth of understanding of this really prevalent disease. It just so goes to show you how asking open-ended questions when we talk to our patients can make such a difference, right? Like just asking about, what does this, how are you impacted by migraine, and being very open with our questions will give you a lot of variation in answers, and will really tell you a lot about what they're experiencing. And when we talk about migraine, and because it is this diverse disease with which people can experience in many different ways, taking that into account when we think about treatment and everything else, as well as research and studying it, it's really important. And I think given that we're really thinking about more patient-centered research, patient-centered care, your data will really help that quite a bit.
Yeah, we're really hopeful. And you had asked earlier about some of our next steps. One of the things that's interesting is this study, we really heard from treatment-seeking participants that were specifically interested in non-drug interventions, and they had significant disease burdens. So, future studies could include a broader population of people with migraine. And you brought up about, having an adolescent with migraine. And so the focus in this study was in adults, but we really need to do studies to look and include the voices of children, adolescents, and families. And so really, moving forward, both as researchers and clinicians, we really need to be intentional in working to identify and target what matters most to the patients, to direct future research endeavors and treatment approaches to ensure that our work is really addressing the needs of those living with migraine. And so I want to take a moment. One of the really unique aspects of this study is the team science aspect. And I feel like this study really is a beautiful reflection of the value of team science. And so we had 7 students on our team that help with this research, and 4 are here today. And I'm really excited to have each of them speak for a moment about the impact of this research and how they've been involved in our team. We started the first study that we conducted the first clinical trial we conducted that provided the data for this research was in 2011. The second clinical trial was in 2015. When both clinical trials were conducted and finished, we started analyzing the qualitative data from both clinical trials in 2019. And so we, as this group will describe, we spent 2 years analyzing this data with weekly team meetings. When the pandemic hit, we just all went virtual and everyone just kept on working away. And so I really have to give huge kudos to the team members that helped with this research, because if it wasn't for all of their tremendous effort, this research wouldn't be where it is today. And so I'm excited to introduce each one of them and have them speak for a moment as well. So Anissa.
Hi, my name is Anissa Berger, and I am in the Masters in Bioethics program at Wake Forest University. And I've been working with Dr. Wells and her research team for about 2 years now. And it has just been such a positive and valuable learning experience. But I think my biggest takeaway was that research like this actually does make a difference for people's lives. And, you know, as somebody who also suffers from migraine, I found it very, very rewarding, you know, to know that this research will help so many people like me whose lives have been so significantly affected by migraine.
Thank you. And Caitlin.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Margol, and I am a recent graduate of Wake Forest University. I've been on this research team since the beginning of my sophomore year. My research experience on this team has helped fuel my long-term personal and professional goals. Working with this study has sparked my interest in clinical research, inspiring me to consider a career of combining clinical medicine with research, just as Dr. Wells does. Also, having close friends and family who suffer from migraine, this study has provided me with great insight into the impact that migraine has on their lives.
Thank you. And Reed.
My name is Reed Anderson. I am now a rising senior at Wake Forest University, and I've been a member of Dr. Wells' research team for 2 years now as a student researcher. And the study has been very significant to me because most of my family and one of my very close childhood friends are afflicted by migraine pretty severely. And I originally joined the team in an attempt to help ease their struggles. So this study in particular has been very significant to me because it has illuminated many of the effects and impacts that migraine has on individuals. And it is going to be a very important step towards improving the well-being of their suffering.
Yeah, wonderful. And Dr. Estave. So Dr. Estave joined our team when she was working on her PhD, and now it's my honor to say she has her PhD. So Dr. Estave.
Hi, my name is Paige Estave. I'm a MD PhD student at Wake Forest School of Medicine. So as Dr. Wells just mentioned, I just graduated with my PhD and am currently finishing up medical school now. So I've been working on Dr. Wells' team for just about 2 years now, coming up in August. And it's been an extremely rewarding experience for me. And I have learned how to mentor and has also given me my first clinical research experience. I suffer from migraine attacks myself. So the work is extremely important to me. I just recently had a daughter, and so in some of the quotes there were people talking about taking care of your kids when you have migraine. And when I had that first migraine after having my baby, there was just like this realization of how people struggle and how it can affect their lives, and how you just have to keep going when you suffer from migraines, even if you don't want to, and then the crash happens and your spouse has to take over. It's things that we heard time and time again from these research participants. I think one of the most significant effects of this work is the focus on the psychosocial factors. I think a lot of times we forget that when we're so focused on medicine. And something that's really important is that this can be applied to other fields of medicine, and that we all need to recognize that these psychosocial factors influence disease experience and also treatment outcomes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much. And Dr. Estave has really done an extraordinary job. She's sort of been the team leader for the students, both sort of as a mentor to them, as well as we were going along with the research, she supervised all of their work that they were doing. And so it's really an honor to work with all of these students. And as you can hear from them, they've just been an extraordinary part of this team.
Well, congratulations to all of you. You know, this work is fantastic, and thank you for what you've done, because this has really added significantly to the headache medicine literature. It's really going to influence my care of patients as a headache clinician. So thank you for that. This will impact the way I take care of my patients, and it will definitely impact medical research. And, so what you do and what you've done has made a difference. And thank you to Dr. Wells, because, your mentorship shows, and I'm incredibly proud of that as well. So, please continue to do this. It's really incredible work, whether it's in headache medicine or otherwise. We need your voice out there. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And thank you. Thank you to the journal for this opportunity to speak today, and for our entire team, and on behalf of many other co-investigators and authors for our research who weren't able to be here today. And most of all, we're appreciative of the patients who participate in our study, because it's their voice that we're illuminating with this work.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.